Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Welcome, listeners, to this week's edition of Extrology, a life of purpose and inspiration, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of extraordinary individuals who redefine resilience, success, and purpose. Today, we have a truly inspiring guest, Chad E. Foster. Chad is an award-winning business leader, an international keynote speaker, and the author of Blind Ambition. From overcoming the unimaginable challenge of losing his sight at 21 to building a billion-dollar career and coaching leaders on resilience, Chad's story is a testament to the power of mindset, grit, and growth. We'll be exploring his journey, unpacking the mindset shifts, and discovering the strategies he's developed to turn adversity into opportunity. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Chad E. Foster, welcome to Extrology. Great to have you here today as my guest. How are you doing today? Hope life is you've had a good start to the day. It's treating you well.
It is. Yeah, I've had a good start to the day. Appreciate you having me on your podcast. I look forward to having the conversation. But yeah, things are going really well. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Well, let's get into it. And I like, as is customary with all things Extrology, to start from the beginning for a little context for listeners. And I wondered if, therefore, you could start by telling us a little bit about your upbringing and early years, and how perhaps those experiences have shaped who you are today.
Yeah. So growing up, I'd say I lived a somewhat typical childhood for a little while. Now it started to get a little bit different as I started losing my eyesight. So I went blind throughout the course of essentially my late teens, early 20s. But before then, I was active. I played sports. I played football. I played basketball, played baseball, wrestled in high school, did lots of things that children who are active tend to do. I drove a car. Couldn't drive one at night because my eyesight never was good enough at night to drive a vehicle. But as a small child, my parents noticed where I had problems in poorly lit situations. And so they took me to Duke University Medical Center here in the United States, where they diagnosed me, the doctors did, with an inherited eye condition known as retinitis pigmentosa. And the doctors, they told my parents when they left, they said, look, you should probably sign him up for a special school for the blind. But instead, my parents decided to sign me up for soccer. A little bit unusual.
What age were you at the point of that diagnosis?
Almost 4 years old. So I was quite young.
Okay. I was going to say, do you recall perhaps as to how that might have made you feel? But I guess at that age, you're not quite yet at a point at which you're forming strong opinions, I guess, around those things.
No, I can't quite recall it, but I do remember another poignant moment in life. I went to go see one of the top retinal specialists in the country. I was 14 years old, and I was talking with the doctor, and he was asking me what I tend to do. And I was telling him, I ride bikes and motorcycles and jet skis and play these sports. And he was really impressed that I was able to do that, because most people who have my eye condition don't have that level of acuity to be able to do those things. And so we left with this feeling of, well, maybe there was a misdiagnosis, because again, when I was diagnosed as a young child, we didn't have genetic markers back then. That's not how they diagnosed it back then. It was just based on symptoms and things that they could observe in the retina visually. And so we left that appointment where I was 14 years old and thought, well, maybe there's a chance I don't have that. Maybe I have a less severe form of a retinal disease than retinitis pigmentosa. And so that was one of those things. I remember I hadn't really been that worried about it up until then, but I could tell based on my parents' reaction, they were both very emotional, that it was a pretty consequential diagnosis, updated diagnosis that we got, and turned out to be inaccurate. But it was it was one of those moments of hope. And I guess in my mind, when you're a kid, you're growing up, you think nothing ever can happen to you, right? You're 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Nothing will ever happen. And that's really how I grew up. I never really lived under this feeling that eventually I would go blind. I just sort of thought, hey, it's not happening to me. It will happen to other people, but not me. And then, in 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, it really started to happen to me. I lost my eyesight, had to get a medical withdrawal from my classes at university when I was 21 years old. Had to switch my major to business, lost nearly 3 years of university work because I'd been studying initially to go into the medical field because I wanted to help other people. And then after I went blind, I wasn't even sure how I could help myself. So I switched my major to business, lost nearly 3 years of university work, and wanted to go into something that was more flexible that would allow me to go in different directions because I didn't even know what I could do, let alone what I wanted to do.
And on a practical level, if we go back to that diagnosis as a child, did that mean therefore were you wearing? I mean, I wore spectacles as a kid, still do now. I'm interested to understand how you were coping and what help was available to you as a child. So were you able to see? How were you seeing? What was your vision like as a child?
Yeah, I didn't really wear spectacles. I didn't really need to. I could see, during the day, my vision was 20/40 uncorrected. So wasn't that bad. I could see well enough to, during the day I could play sports. You know,
Yeah.
I could play billiards. I could play tennis. I could shoot a basketball. I could, all those things. It was actually pretty good. Where it really wasn't good was in when we got at night in poorly lit situations. And so basically, what's going on scientifically is the rods and cones in my retina were not healthy, and so dimly lit environments gave me challenges. That's what gave me challenges. As
Right.
long as the lighting was good, really wasn't that much of a problem for a while until late teens, early 20s. Then it started to fade. It deteriorated even in well lit situations, and that's when it shifted from being only a nighttime problem to being a around the clock problem. And I'd always had poor night vision, but now I had poor day vision too. Which, by the way, if you have poor night vision and poor day vision, you're blind, right? That's pretty much when you go blind.
Was there a moment that you recall when you think actually this is now things are starting to change, and that you were starting to experience that daytime hindrance to which you refer?
Yeah, there were a couple of them. There were a couple of moments like that. The Probably the most pivotal moment was when I realized that the vision that I had was gone. The land underneath my feet had completely shifted, and that was when I was reading a literature assignment when I literally just I couldn't see to read the words on the page because these tiny floating dots just kept getting in the way, and I couldn't see around them. They were like a swarm of bees. And it's one thing, when you can't see and it's in poor lighting conditions or at night or whatever, but it's totally different when you're sitting at your desk under a bright lamp and you can't see the words on the page right in front of you. That was the moment that it hit me that everything I've been warned about my entire life was coming to fruition. That's when I realized darkness was knocking on my door and my life was about to change forever. And I knew from that point forward, I would never be able to see another sunset or see my future wife or never be able to see my future kids. And that was a tough time.
I I can't even begin to imagine. Do you recall how did that make you feel?
Hopeless, devastated, angry, bitter, depressed, all those things. Just there was a lot of everything swirling and going on at the same time. And then there was the practical reality of, well, I'm in college, and college, it's kind of important to learn. And it's kind of what you're doing in college. And how do you take in information? So you do it by reading visually. And so I needed to figure out, not only do I need a new learning system, but I need to figure out, okay, well, I wanted to do something in the medical field that required vision. Now I don't have that. What am I going to do? I need to figure out, what am I going to do? What can I do? How am I going to consume the information in order to get whatever college degree I need to get? It's all these different practical things in addition to obviously the raw emotional and psychological things that were going on inside my head.
I guess first and foremost, clearly dealing with the emotional implications of what you're taking on is enormous. But also, if I'm looking at the kind of, I guess the consistent theme around for many younger people is, knowing what you want to do. What are you going to do with your life? What is it going to be? What are you going to be? What are you going to be called? What purpose? What all these sort of questions are going through naturally through your life, through your teens and through your early 20s. Medicine or the medical profession had been a choice. How long had that been a feature for you? And I guess how shattering was that to know that that was no longer a dream that was available to you? It's certainly in the form that you originally had intended it to be.
It had been something I'd thought about for 3 or 4 years, but it was a lot less consequential than I think the bigger. It was not great, but I think the bigger picture of wait, I'm never going to be able to literally see the world. I'm never literally going to be able to see my wife and never see my kids. That's what really dominated my airwaves. It was hard for me to move beyond that. And so I actually contemplated for some time, maybe I just need to drop out of college and go see the world while I can, what little bit of precious vision I have left. And I ended up not doing that, which is probably good because had I done that, I'm not sure I would have ever gotten back into school. I might have just continued to spiral from that point forward. But yeah, I was dejected about the career, but a whole lot less worried about the career than just the broader emotional impact of what this means for the rest of my life. And like you said, what are you going to be when you grow up? What's your self-image and how do you see yourself? And I always considered myself a independent, kind of hard charging young man. And it's hard to charge very hard when you can't see where the hell you're going, right? So it like all these stereotypes of being a dependent, being disabled, being helpless, all these things just crept into my consciousness of, okay, how am I going to navigate all of this? Because this isn't what I wanted to be. We ask kids all the time what they want to be when they grow up. And guess what? None of them say they want to be a blind person. So I had to figure out how to deal with all of that in addition to figure out what it is that I actually want to do to earn income. And so there were these identity issues and feelings of dependence and helplessness and victimhood and all this stuff just swirling in my late teens, early 20s.
And was there any help available to you to help you through all of, an enormous range of issues, horrendous circumstances? Was there help available, and what sort of help, therefore, was available for you to undertake?
The university gave me some note takers who would go with me to class and write my notes down, take notes for me because I couldn't see to write anymore. I started finding that there were computers out there that you could get software to use the computer. I started figuring that out, and all the books were hard copy back then, paperback, hard copy. There were no soft copy books, no digital books, no books on audio at the time. And so my mom entered the scene at this point and performed the Herculean task of reading every single college business book to audio cassette for me at the time.
Wow.
That was how I got all of my information. And I went from being a visual learner to having to relearn how to learn without being able to see. And it turns out I was actually a better blind student than sighted student. I recorded the lectures on a micro cassette. I listened to each lecture twice. I read each book twice on audio cassette that my mom had read to me. The note takers that the university provided would come with me and help me prepare and go over the notes that they had taken. And I actually made no less than an A in all of my College of Business Administration classes for the time that I was at university. So I literally made straight A's the whole time I was there after I figured out my new learning system.
How did you find the resilience to push forward?
I realized that I didn't really have much of a choice other than just give up on life. And I thought I was too young to give up on life. Had I been 60, 70, 80 years old, maybe I would have. But I looked at feeling sorry for myself for the rest of my life and realized that I got another 50, 60 years to live and just decided it was too much sorry. I couldn't sit around and feel sorry for myself for that long. So I had two choices. I could either just throw my life away, sit around and feel sorry for myself, become a loser, or I could try. I could try to just, take the next positive step. What's the next best step I can take? And so that's what I did. I just started putting one foot in front of the other and figuring out, okay, I need to get a new guide dog so that I can actually be mobile and get from point A to point B. I need to relearn how to learn. I need to make good grades. I need to figure out how to use a computer. Eventually, I graduated college and realized, all right, I got a great job at a top consulting firm. Now I need to learn how to write code without being able to see my computer screen. And I need to be able to do that in order to do my job, but also to use the software that doesn't work with my software, my screen reading software. And so I did that. I taught myself how to write code to engineer software without being able to see my computer screen. And I just started stacking win on top of win, whether it's, getting the dog or getting the new outlook on life with an anchor towards gratitude, or making good grades, relearning how to learn, getting a good job offer, and then picking up new skills and getting promotions, and all those things just, they kept leading to more and more positive affirmations about what was possible. And I started learning that I was capable of more than I thought was possible. And I've come to find out that we all are. None of us fully give ourselves credit for what we're capable of if we can just apply ourselves.
I read that you said you feel successful because you're blind, not in spite of it. Could you unpack that perspective a little more?
Yeah, I feel like when I could see, things were a lot easier. Learning, school, athletics, everything came much easier to me. And after I went blind, everything was obviously a lot harder. I had to have a better level of effort and more focus and more determination and a unique perspective. And none of that would have happened had I not gone blind. So going blind forced me to improve all those things, but it also taught me that happiness is not some event that happens to you. It's a decision that you take. It's a perspective that you make. It's how you choose to see the things that are outside your control. So a lot of people live their entire lives waiting for something outside of them to make them happy. Some promotion, some romantic relationship, some relationship with their kids, like something outside of them, they're waiting on it to make them happy. And I learned early on that that's not how happiness works. Happiness has to come from the inside out. And I've always since then mused that how could people leave something so important as their happiness precariously to the whims of circumstance? And so I learned that at an early age, with a heavy price tag, of course, but I'm happier and I'm more successful now than when I could see. And it's because of going blind. I learned that success is not an event. It's a mindset that we have, and a willingness to tolerate or not the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so to the extent that you're unwilling to tolerate your current circumstances, you'll be able to change them. And if you're willing to tolerate them, you won't. And it really is that simple. And I think a lot of us, have a tendency to be a victim and look for excuses. And certainly I did too, until this happened to me. And I realized that, I can't do this. This is not how I'm going to live. Because even if I come up with legitimate reasons to not get to my goals, and I'm 75 years old looking back on my life in my golden years, if I don't get to my goals, then I'm the one who will suffer. And so I started holding myself accountable and doing the hard work and doing the things that needed to be done to get to my goals.
It's incredible. I mean, I think all credit to you. What you talk of by way of mindset, I think for many is, if not necessarily easy to understand, it's relatable. People get it. We get a sense that we have a choice as to not necessarily the cards we're dealt, but certainly how we choose to deal with those cards. It is a choice. Yep. But actually then the tools, techniques, application, being human is a roller coaster, isn't it? For us all, there are good days and bad, good moments and bad moments. And those tough times or tough thoughts or unhappiness, in whatever way that manifests for you as an individual, comes to us all at some certain time. So how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? How do you address it? How do you overcome it?
Well, I think it's important that, first of all, we are human. We have to, those thoughts and feelings and emotions are real. And they serve a purpose, right? Every emotion serves a purpose. And so we have to let those emotions and feelings breathe. We have to give them, the air and the ventilation that they need, but also recognize that when we're crossing the line between healthy ventilation into unhealthy rumination, when do those thoughts become unhealthy patterns of rumination and a spiraling negative toxic pattern of thought? And that I think there's a fine line between that. And so we have to figure out, how long are we going to let these things dominate the airwaves of our mind? And that's true regardless of what we're going through. But certainly, emotions and feelings are like waves in the water. They'll roll in and they'll roll out if we let them, if we hold on to them. And then, of course, they'll stick around longer than they need to. And that's when we get pulled down into that unhealthy spiral of rumination. And so I try to stay in the moment as much as possible. I also know, frankly, what helps wire my system for me to stay more on balance and happier. And I know that for me, a big part of me staying happy is me being active. So that's why I exercise. I exercise regularly. I'll lift weights 5, 6 times a week. I'll train jujitsu 6, 7 times a week. Those things I know put me in the best possible headspace, because it's me taking care of myself. It gives me the outlet that I need, physical outlet, mental outlet. It feeds my mind, my body, my spirit, all those things. And it also helps me create endorphins that improve my odds of being in a better headspace. So I know the formula for my best self includes regular exercise. And so I make that a priority for me. It's not something that I view as optional. It's just how I live. It's not something that I do. It's who I am.
When did you first get into jiu-jitsu, and what was it that attracted you to the sport?
I got into BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 3 years ago. So I was almost 40. I was almost 46. I turned 49 here in a couple of months. And I think what drew me to it, well, initially was I wanted to spend some time with my kids doing some activity. And I realized that I wouldn't be able to be very good at teaching them how to shoot a basketball or catch a baseball anymore. So I decided to take a different path. I wanted to be able to spend some time with them doing some activity. So we got into jujitsu, and I ended up getting really hooked on it because it's so great at teaching you how to settle into discomfort. It forces you to be comfortable with discomfort. The first few times you get on a mat and somebody puts you in a chokehold and you've got no way out, it's pretty scary, right? It feels like your head's being put inside a vacuum cleaner bag. But when you move towards that discomfort, a funny thing happens. You learn over time to settle into the terror that you experience. You learn to lay down in the fear, and you learn that instead of panicking and letting your adrenaline take over, you learn to control your breathing and bring your heart rate down, and to calmly step through the fear so you can calmly find your way out of that situation. And ironically, a lot of times, those seemingly inescapable chokeholds actually do have a way out if you can just stay calm enough to look for them. And that's true whether you're training on the mat in jiu-jitsu, whether you're fighting somebody, or whether you're dealing with a scary work issue or scary personal issue. You see, the more comfortable you get with discomfort, the more your comfort zone expands. And that's because you're expanding, you're growing, and you're able to step into things that maybe didn't seem possible otherwise. And so for me, I don't even consider it a sport or a martial art at this point. I consider it a way of life, because it is so much about being humble and not worrying about winning as much as you're worried about learning, and succumbing to the fear and not letting it dominate your decision making. And instead of fear being something that we run from, for me, I've now found that fear sort of is the direction of travel for me. I want to move towards fear. And the reason I want to move towards fear is because I know that growth is on the other side of the fear. And I don't want the fear to dominate my decision making. And the only way to do that is to move towards it. So as you can imagine, the first time I competed in a tournament, I'd not been training that long. And you go to these tournaments and people are not out there to be nice. They're there to win. And that may or may not involve you getting injured. And So that was pretty scary for me. But I realized that's exactly why I needed to do it, was because I didn't want it to continue to live inside my head rent free. So I went and competed, much to the chagrin of my wife. But I didn't get hurt, and it went fine. I didn't win, but you know what? I wasn't really competing against the other people on the mat. I was competing more against myself. That was the person I was really competing against, making sure that the person in my head who was scared wasn't going to win. It was really just about competing against my own mind, and making sure that I didn't let fear control my decision making.
I mean, it's very evident that this resilience that you evidence tremendously, and that ability to adapt through incredible adversity it strikes me, at least, a core part of who you are. And I think what I'm interested to understand is this sense of getting comfortable with discomfort, which I think is a great phrase. How do you apply that to help others build resilience?
Well, it's one of the 5 pillars of resilience that I talk about in my keynote presentations. It's crucial. And you don't start necessarily with getting on the mat to train in jiu-jitsu, or skiing down a black diamond without being able to see. You have to start very small stakes environments. So for some people, just getting comfortable with discomfort might be asking somebody if they want to go out for a cup of coffee to talk about a role that's open at their company. Or maybe it's going out in public at a certain time. Or I think all of us, and we have different levels of comfort. And so what I want to help people do is understand that discomfort is not the enemy. Comfort is complacency. They are the same thing. If you are comfortable, you are complacent. And so complacency never leads to growth. So we have to get comfortable with discomfort. And we do that not by, for the very first time, putting on a pair of skis and going down a black diamond. That's foolishness, right? That's a way to end up in the hospital. We start off in small stakes environments. So maybe to stick with the metaphor of skiing, maybe it's just getting on the skis and getting on a bunny slope, or getting on the magic carpet, or getting on and off the lift. And so for all of us, we have to eventually keep edging slightly outside of our comfort zone, because I know that's where growth happens. I know that's where innovation happens. I know that it's just not possible to grow unless we're getting uncomfortable. It's where life begins, is outside of our comfort zones.
So let's talk a bit about your book, if I may. Blind Ambition. What inspired you to write it? Was there a specific moment or turning point that you thought, do you know what, now's the time to share my story?
Yeah, there was. So I was studying at Harvard Business School. My company had sent me to Harvard Business School because I'd brought in billions of dollars in contracts for the company, and they asked me what they could do for me. For some crazy reason, I asked them to write a 6-figure check and send me to Harvard. And for some crazier reason, they agreed. They said okay. And so I'm studying there with Bill George, who teaches authentic leadership and True North, when I realized I'd never done anything with my story. And he talks about how to discover your true north. And it's about finding moments in your life that were difficult, and moments of hardship, and at poignant moments in your life and your upbringing, and linking that to what you do on a professional basis, where you've got some talent, is a way to really find your true north, your purpose in life. And as luck would have it, I was elected as our graduating speaker there. And I saw firsthand how much I could help people if I just put some effort behind reaching these people in the audience. And so I had a gentleman come up to me, and he's literally, he's kind of breaking down in my arms, because something I'd said helped him. And I found out later on that this gentleman had lost his daughter the year before to cancer, and something I'd said had helped him in some small way. And for me, it was a life-changing moment, because I realized that I'd been looking at the impact that I could have on other people through my own lens instead of the lens of other people. And because I don't think anything that I've done is all that inspiring, right? I'm just doing what I had to do. I was dealing with the circumstances that life dealt me, and I was trying to get to my goals in life. And I just kept pushing and pushing. But I realized maybe there's more to it than what I'm able to see, and this gentleman helped me understand that with his reaction. And, once you know how much you can help people in a moment like that, you can't unknow that, and it changes you. And I realized that if I didn't do anything with my story and my message, knowing that I could have that kind of impact after literally just one attempt, then it almost felt negligent, like I was being irresponsible. And so I decided that, you know what, I've been thinking about writing a book for a long time, and maybe being a speaker, maybe I need to stop talking about it and just do it and see what happens. And, before long, I've got the agreement with HarperCollins leadership. The book's coming out. Now I've built a successful speaking business around that as well. Took that little 10, 12-minute talk that I'd given at Harvard, and now I do 60, 90, 120-minute keynotes, workshops, presentations. The book's out. I'm thinking about the second book, and I'm able to help a lot of people, which is a really enriching and fulfilling thing. In some bizarre sort of way, it actually makes going blind worth it, which is sort of weird to say and think.
I mean, it strikes me that writing it's a really personal and deeply transformative story that I'm sure writing would have brought about its own challenges. What do you think you learned about yourself during the writing process?
I think I learned that I'm often in motion. As I was writing, like I was trying to identify, because whenever I was writing it, like, okay, as I'm doing this job, I'm doing extra here and extra there. And, I don't know. I mean, I'm often in motion. And, whether it's starting a new business or taking on a new career or going to school, or, there's a lot of energy there, a lot of energy. And is that restlessness? Is it blind ambition? Is it like, what is it? I'm not sure I fully understand why it's there. I'm sure there are multiple reasons for it, but I think it's hard to ignore. Like some people might be fine with just going to work 8 hours, coming home and sitting on the couch and watching TV until they go to bed. And that's not how I'm wired. My wife and I, we go to the beach and we'll hang out at the beach, and there's only so much sitting in the sand I can do. I have to get up and do something. That's why I'd much rather go skiing, because I'm doing something. I like to be active. I like to be on the go. And so I think the big aha moment for me was, wow, it seems like I'm in motion a lot as I reflect on all these experiences over my life. I wonder what that says about me.
You talk about turning blindness from a disability into a unique ability to help others see their own blind spots. What message or impact do you hope readers will take from the book?
I hope that they take that they don't have to feel limited by their own circumstances. I think we all come up with self-limiting beliefs that prevent us from living the life of our choosing. And I hope that they look at my story and they look at my message, whether it's through the book or through my keynote presentations, and realize that, you are capable of more than you thought was possible. You are. And the only limit that you have is your own beliefs and your own thinking about what you're capable of. You have the ability to redefine what's possible for you. And the more you lean into that idea, the more you'll notice the gap between what you thought was possible and what is possible, the bigger that gap becomes over time. If you're talking about the difference between what you can do this year and what you thought you could do this year, there's a gap there, I promise you. But you start building that gap up year over year over the course of 15, 20 years, you can't even wrap your head around what you can do because you just don't know. If I look back on my life, when I was 21, so 27 years ago now, I'm 48. There's zero chance I ever thought I'd be where I'm at. Zero. Like none. I just wanted to have a decent career in the corporate world. I just wanted to be able to have a family. But now here I am, 27 years removed. I've reinvented myself several times over. And it's just like this, what I'm doing today never would have occurred to me back then. And so you start redefining what's possible for yourself, and opportunities and doors will open in front of you that you just cannot even imagine right now.
Do you think writing the book has changed the way you see your own journey?
No, I don't think it's changed the way I see it. I think it's helped me, I guess, remember a lot of what actually needed to happen in order for me to make it through what I've been through. I wanted to have something for other people to read, including the kids, because, my kids, I wanted them to know what I've been through when they got older, because they don't know me as, anything other than dad. I'm literally normal to them, right? And you hear my oldest, our daughter, she's getting ready to turn 16, and she's like, "Oh yeah," she's talking to her friends. "Oh, that's right, your dad can drive. Oh, that's right, your dad can see." Like, it's normal for her to have a blind dad. Like, pause on that for a minute. It's not really normal for most people, but it is for my kids. And so they get to take for granted what I do and what I'm about. And I wanted them to have a way for them to think about not only what I've been through, but what they will go through. And some of the reasons why I asked them to do the things that I asked them to do to help prepare them for what life has in store for them. And so, I don't know that it's changed the way that I think about it, but certainly it's given me a better way to communicate it, catalog it, and hopefully, create an opportunity to affect people and reach people in a way that otherwise would not be possible. Because when I'm speaking, I might speak to 30, 40, 50,000 people a year in audiences, but obviously the book can reach people in a way that being at a conference just cannot do.
Talking of the keynotes, Chad, what do you enjoy about the keynote experience as the speaker?
I like entertaining, because there's a lot of entertainment value that goes with the keynote, but it really challenging people's traditional ideas of what they think they're going to get. I step on stage and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've never had anybody say this, but I'm putting myself in their shoes. Like, here's a blind guy. He's got a dog leading him around. Is this going to be a bless your heart kind of thing? Oh my goodness." And then I get on stage, and in the first 3 minutes, they know it's not one of those, right? I'm a little in your face. It's a little edgy. I'm not what most people expect. This is not a strum the heartstrings and feel sorry for me kind of thing. And I make that very obvious in the first 3 minutes. My first story is carefully constructed to do just that, to set a tone of, this is going to be funny, this is going to be edgy, and it's not going to be what you thought it was going to be. So pull up a seat, pay attention, and let's have some fun. And so I enjoy the entertainment part of it, but I enjoy challenging traditional ideas of what people think they're going to get in the keynote presentation, but really, empowering them to not feel like victims of whatever's going on in their lives.
Do you think that strikes me? It resonates with that theme around getting comfortable with discomfort. You're almost encouraging your audience that this is what you're going to experience today. So kind of strap yourselves in. It's going to be uncomfortable, but this is where the growth is going to come.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I use humor to get rid of some of the discomfort. So some of the humor, I vacillate back and forth between, I use the humor to disarm the tension because it makes me more relatable. So why do people follow other people? Well, it's because of warmth and competency. Can this person deliver the goods? That's competence. Is this person warm? Meaning, are they relatable? Do I feel like they're a person, I could sit down with, have a cup of tea, or have a beer with, or whatever the case may be. And so the humor helps me to create the warmth. The story that I've chosen allows me to have to show some competence as well. But the humor buys me permission to say some of the edgier things that I say that I think need to be said. Some of the harder truths that are out there that I'll say. And part of that is getting comfortable with discomfort. But I vacillate back and forth between using humor, because people are, when I encounter people, Lee, they'll be like, "Oh, did you see the game? Oh, I mean, did you hear the game?" It's like, "No, look, you don't have to worry about that. Like, that's clumsy. Let's move beyond that." And so I'll drop a few jokes early and often so they know, okay, this guy's not worried about words, right? He can have fun with the situation. Obviously, he's dealing with a serious situation, but he's not taking it so seriously that he cannot have fun with it. And so I like to help disarm that tension with the relatability, with the humor, and so they can focus on the content of the message. But, obviously the humor helps me relate with them, but then it buys me a little more permission when I say some of the edgier things that challenges their traditional ideas of maybe what should be acceptable and what is acceptable.
And the thing that strikes me is constantly throughout your journey, you're cultivating your own growth mindset. if you like, which it is in itself. It's never an easy feat. I had a conversation earlier today as to not specifically mental health, but actually what we were talking about was mental fitness and this sense of kind of turning up every day and putting in the reps, drawing the kind of physical fitness analogy, but actually to ensure that if we are to enjoy mental fitness in the same way, it's a constant journey. There's no finish line. We again drew the analogy through the conversation as to getting yourself physically fit. You don't kind of go to the gym for 6 weeks and then go, right, I'm fit now, I can stop. You've got to maintain it, right, if you want to stay in shape. It's similar with mental fitness, I think, and this growth mindset that you've cultivated. I guess you mentioned some of the physical practices, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, for example, lifting weights, but what other practices have helped you foster and maintain this mindset over the years?
Taking on new tasks, taking on, new areas of learning and professional endeavors, whether that's learning how to give a keynote presentation and hold an audience's attention from start to finish for 60 to 90 minutes, learning how to lead a workshop, learning how to write a book, right? Writing a book I was great at business writing. I was great at presenting slides, but that's not the same as giving a keynote presentation to 10,000 people and holding their attention from start to end for 60, 90 minutes. It's a very different skill. And so I had to learn how to do that. I had to learn how to write a book where you have to earn people's permission to turn the page. And so how are you pushing yourself? How are you reinventing yourself? How are you continuing to learn and step into other areas? In my business, it was not only the front end activities like the art of the speaking and the writing, but running the back end part of the business and understanding the back end of the business and how do I actually drive and improve and grow that. And so I feel like jiu-jitsu is a great metaphor for it, because in order to be successful with jiu-jitsu, you have to have the beginner's mind all the time, every day. You have to study the same techniques that you learned on day one with the same curiosity on year 5 or year 10 or year 15. And you see the black belts do it. They'll show up and they'll study the same basic technique that they learned on day one 15 years earlier in their journey with the same beginner's mind that they had on day one. And that's so crucial for every part of life, whether it's, learning how to give a keynote presentation or taking on a new career path or write a book or whatever the case may be, having that beginner's mind and willingness to step out and continue to grow and continue to have that learning mindset. Because that really it's where growth happens. We could focus on winning and success and all those things, but really, like in jiu-jitsu, if you're just learning, eventually you'll win, right? And so is it better to learn or is it better to win? Well, I think learning is more important because learning leads to winning. And so that's true. That's true in a professional sense as well.
You can almost say that learning is the win, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's a great way of saying it.
Are there sort of some core habits perhaps or routines that you believe contribute, that you could share with us, that contribute to your peak performance, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think for starters, it's my morning routine. So that's really important. And I would encourage everybody to take some time and journal for, maybe 2 or 3 weeks at a minimum to understand what contributes to your best self. What's the formula for your best self? And so I've done this before where I've literally written down, what did I eat? What time did I go to bed? What did I do when I got up? And start to understand and rate myself. How did I do today? How did I feel? Did I feel like I was at my best on a scale of 1 to 10? Like, how would I rate myself? How was my energy level? How was my contribution? And start to identify some patterns between what were my activities, what time of day, the food, the sleep patterns, all that, and how I showed up. And what I understood was, for me to feel like I'm at my best, there are certain basket of behaviors that really needed to happen on a consistent basis. It's getting in bed early. It's getting 7 hours of sleep. It's getting up early. It's getting in my exercise routine first thing in the morning. It's getting in 30 minutes of mindfulness, of sitting meditation, and really preparing myself and feeding myself, nourishing myself before I go off and do what I need to do. And so once the day starts, I'm often running I'm a parent, I'm a husband, I'm running a business, all these different things. But if I don't take care of myself, how could I ever take care of all these other things? And so I like to use the analogy like when you fly and they tell you to put on your mask if cabin pressure drops, but make sure you put on your mask before you help other people secure their mask. For me, my core activities are how I secure my mask so that I can be there for others and help them, and so I can get their mask on them. And so it's for me, it's really understanding what are those core things. And I know that if I do those things that I said, the exercise and the mindfulness and decent sleep and good balanced diet, then I can be there. And regardless of how long the days are, or how much work comes at me, or what needs to be done with family or otherwise, I'm in a good mental and emotional space. I have a sense of centeredness to be able to manage to that and perform without really getting burned out.
What's your approach to setting goals, Chad? Especially when if you look at you've got some insurmountable obstacles that you have presented you through the course of your life. But so how do you approach setting goals? I know you've got some big ambitious goals, and good for you. I'm not asking you necessarily to share those specifically, but how you approach setting them, I think, is really interesting for listeners to understand.
Well, I think it's a combination of what do I think is possible and what do I think I need to do in order to reach that. A lot of times I'll identify the next, I don't know, 6-12 months of where I need to be. I'll set goals for the next 6 to 12 months, but I'll actually set them a little higher than I'd like to get to, so that if I fall short, then hopefully I'm where I wanted to be initially. So I'll plus up my goals a little bit so that I can, still get the desired outcome. But obviously I have ambitious goals, but I think, there's a line between having an ambitious vision and having goals. I think the goals have to reach the vision. And so I actually tend to think goals need to be more bite size and more digestible than the vision. And so my vision for myself is very ambitious. I have an ambitious vision for myself of where I want to be in 3 to 5 years. My goals are a lot more grounded in, incremental steps, practical reality to get there over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And so I tend to break things down into bite-sized steps. And so I'll set a vision for myself over the next 5 years. I'll really understand that vision. How does it look? How does it smell? What are the sensory words that I would use to describe that, paint a really vivid picture of that in my head? And then what are the goals that help me get to that? And how do I decompose that into the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months? And then when I do that, I tend to add a little bit more of an uplift to those individual goals so that my odds of success, even if I don't reach the actual goal, I still get to where I want to be over that time horizon.
And what about purpose? It strikes me that you've turned adversity into a really compelling, powerful purpose. We've seen that in Blind Ambition and certainly in your speaking engagements and indeed throughout your wider career. How do you guide others in finding their purpose, especially when perhaps people feel defeated, they feel it's insurmountable, it's tough to overcome? How do you guide others to find their purpose?
Well, it's all about the stories they tell themselves. Fundamentally, we all become the stories that we tell ourselves. You will become the stories that you tell yourself about the circumstances in your life, about the adversity that you're facing. If you're telling yourself a story of poor me and this is too hard, then that's very likely to be true. But instead, if you're telling yourself a story of, well, this is an opportunity for growth for me, and I will be a better person because of this adversity, and here's how I'm going to use it to do some good, then you can reframe that adversity into a springboard for growth, which is what I've done. And so I hope that everybody can really unpack how crucial it is to make sure that they control the narratives in their head about why they're facing what they're facing. And if they can do that and then really understand why they're doing the work that they're doing, what is the meaning behind the work that they're doing, and really extrapolate their purpose as it relates to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. See, that's where motivation and drive come into play, right? If you're doing a job because you're doing it for the check, it's not very lasting, right? It feels transactional. It's not going to help you get to where you want to be. But if you're doing a job because you're connected to it at a deeply emotional level, then you'll never run out of energy. You'll never run out of drive, and you'll never run out of motivation because you've connected with it on an emotional level. You're not doing it for the money. You're doing it because of the difference that you can make with the work that you're doing, and the money that you make just happens to be icing on the cake.
So if you look at your own purpose, what role do you think finding your purpose has played in your journey, and how does that purpose continue to shape your outlook today, do you think?
Well, finding your purpose gives you the courage to step through the fears, to do the hard things that we need to do to succeed. If you're never focusing on your impact on other people, I feel like in my life, it compelled me to move beyond myself and not think about my own goals as much as the impact I can have on other people. That's what gave me the courage to step through my fears, to start this new line of work. I didn't want to be a public speaker, Lee. I had zero interest in being a speaker. I didn't want to be a professional speaker. It chose me. I didn't choose it. It chose me. Now I'm having fun doing it. The first 20 times I did it were not fun. It was white knuckle experience, right? It was not fun at all. But I did it not because I wanted to have fun. I did it because I knew I could have impact on people in a positive way. And so focusing on why I was doing it, the other people, how I could help the other people, gave me the courage to step through my fears and reinvent myself to where now I actually enjoy doing what I do. That, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was only doing the speaking. Oh, I want to make money as a speaker. Oh, I want to entertain people as a speaker. That's just not compelling enough, I think, to step through the fear and do the hard things. So you have to move beyond yourself and look at the impact that you can create for other people. That's what gave me the motivation to find my purpose.
So I think hindsight is a wonderful thing, Chad. If you were to reflect back, or perhaps if we could step back in time, if we could travel back in time and sit down with 21-year-old Chaddy Foster, knowing what you now know, what would you tell yourself? What message would you want to share?
Don't get too worried. Don't get too sad. Everything happens for a reason, and the reason will reveal itself in time. And your life is going to be far better than you could ever imagine right now. I know it feels hopeless right now, but it's going to be far more fulfilling than you could ever hope for, and maybe even more fulfilling than you would have had you not gone blind.
I think that's a wonderfully powerful place in which to leave it today. Chad, thank you. That's been humbling, I think, is the word that springs to mind. That's instinctively, intuitively the phrase that leaps out at me. Inspiring. I think it's an incredible story. That the evidence that you had, your resilience, how you've adapted through adversity. I love that phrase, getting comfortable with discomfort. I think there's just so much that listeners can take away from the story that you've shared with us today, your view, your perspective. It's been wonderful. For those that want to find out more, and I know that plenty will, where should we point them? Where can they go to find out more about you?
Go to my website. It's chadefoster.com/Extrology. We've got a landing page there where visitors can find something for them specifically. But from there, they'll be able to find links to my social media, links to videos, links to my book, links to press and blog articles that I've written, all kinds of contents out there. So check that out. Again, that's chadefoster.com/Extrology.
Fantastic. And I would encourage you listeners to definitely check that out. If only that I've checked out some of the videos. They're so powerful. I defy you to be inspired by what you see and what you hear. It's phenomenal stuff. But Chad, thank you. It's been a real privilege to share this conversation with you today. I really appreciate you taking the time out to share your thoughts and journey with us, and wish you continued success. I've no doubt with the mindset that you evidence, you'll continue to achieve incredible feats, incredible things, and inspire many along the way. And really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey listeners, thank you for your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, don't forget to leave us a review. It's a great way to help others discover this wonderful community of extraordinary people just like you. You can also find more great content at extrology.com, and of course you can keep up to date with all things Extrology on the socials. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to your podcast. We look forward to welcoming you back next time. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.